Wizards of the Coast is going full comic book industry with what they're doing with this 2024 edition of Dungeons & Dragons. We're going to get into this news in just a moment, as we've seen just exactly how bad Dungeons & Dragons has been for Wizards of the Coast over the last couple of years. It's been a train wreck of wokeness, and they're trying to gin up their sales is really what's coming down to this. This is a tried and true tactic where it's like, there's a problem happening here when you come to this kind of thing. And we're going to get into it in just a moment. It was noticed by a good friend of the channel who I'll give a shout out to as he posted to X, and we will of course, cover everything that Wizards of the Coast is doing with Dungeons & Dragons, fantasy tabletop RPGs. We love science fiction and fantasy here, my friends, and I'm a fantasy writer myself. I would love for you to check out my Adventures of Baron von Monocle. It's a 6-book series with his questing. It's airship crew that's questing. They fight monsters. They get into a war. Lots of fun stuff happens throughout this series, and it builds very, very nicely. So grab the whole thing. It's on ebook, print, and audio today in the description below. Really appreciate all you guys making this a perennial bestseller and reading, because it's been amazing. And of course, the D&D players love to read, as is evidenced from all of the Dragonlance and Forgotten Realms novels, which I loved growing up as well. So check that out. It's in the description below. Wizards of the Coast, it does not appear to be confident in their Dungeons & Dragons 2024 edition at all. Tabletop RPG expert Kevin Lamb exposed that the company is trying a comic book industry tactic to artificially boost sales numbers that will have nothing to do with getting new gamers to actually play D&D. I don't know anybody who's playing this new edition, honestly. Do you? Are you playing it? Let me know. With the addition of D&D, this edition of D&D, if you don't know already, Wizards of the Coast has already courted controversy with their changes to the game by adding diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda on top of their core rulebooks. D&D players, as a result, have been watching their beloved role-playing game of questing, fighting monsters turned into a political cudgel and social conditioning tool by the Hasbro Corporation. You see this with these giant corporations all the time. We're covering Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and just exactly what's happened because they were bought by the Embracer Group, a giant thing that is very much like Hasbro, who, of course, has BlackRock heavily invested into it. Seems to be the case with all of these companies that are going woke. Now, we'll see what happens with this USAID stuff that's breaking, because, my gosh, everybody, with that, you don't know whether we're going to actually see all of this collapse or not, because it might have been all funded by the government on the back end. We'll see. Now, before the new Monster Manual began to be promoted, the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide infamously incorporated BDSM fetish community practice into the game for safe space. This is one of my favorite AI images I've ever seen. Having players make the X with their arms if they feel triggered by a situation requiring a DM to stop the game and address the player in questions. Yes, stop the game, Mr. DM. That's right. The player handbook is also filled with imagery of like BIPOC and female characters on a margin of more than 5-1 for white male characters, despite the opposite of the demographics being true who play the game. You can barely find any white males in the book whatsoever, but if you're looking for black women who are disabled, I mean, they are there for you. Those are the players that they want, my friends. Dungeons & Dragons came under further scrutiny when it revealed senior designer Jason Tondro penned a foreword to the history book on Dungeons & Dragons, calling Gary Gygax misogynistic and accusing him of cultural appropriation. That prompted Elon Musk to beg the question of how much Hasbro costs to buy for him. And, of course, that's the parent company of Wizards of the Coast, to try to save Dungeons & Dragons from these controversies. Just last week, we covered the Monster Manual, had a lot of woke changes, including removing orcs, that's the big one, because they're not monsters, they're people too, my friends. It'd be racist to think otherwise. Also adding gender ideology from elements to creatures like hags, succubus, and sphinxes. Fans have been vocal in complaining about this mistreatment of the game. Now, they've removed the term race in general from the game as well. It's now species, and you can't play a half-orc, you can't play a half-elk. It's absolutely ridiculous. I don't understand that. I mean, I guess they like their segregation and they don't like race mixing. That's what the woke's into now. I'm very, very confused as to what the current year woke is and where that line is, and what's racist and what's not. Last I heard, I thought it was race mixing was supposed to be everywhere. I mean, if you watch every single TV commercial over the last 20 years, it's always a black dude with a white woman. So what's happening now? I don't know. I can't keep up. I can't keep up. It's no wonder with this kind of bad publicity, Wizards of the Coast is scrambling to make up for sales to lost potential customers to try to prove their product still has relevancy. Kevin Lamb is a tabletop RPG expert on X. He's amazing, guys. If you don't follow him, I highly recommend it. He posts a lot about classic content regarding Dungeons & Dragons, Appendix N, the old editions, AD&D. It's really nice. He has a wonderful feed that I follow very regularly. And he first noticed that Wizards of the Coast is trying a desperate move with the new D&D edition that the comic book industry has used to artificially inflate sales for years. He says Wizards of the Coast is doing alternate cover gimmicks to entice people to spend $100 on 2 monster manuals. Or you could just spend less and get the real thing, is what he says. So if this is the deal, they've got 2 different covers. As you can see, this is their, fairy tale edition cover. This is their regular sort of 2022 cover. And they could try to do that. And of course, he says go buy Advanced Dungeons & Dragons as a result, which is $72 for the manual, which is less than the 2 combined, and then you can play real D&D instead of this fake watered down D&D. And this is honestly a comic industry tactic. And I come from a comic book background. If you guys are unaware, we've been talking about comics for a long time, and of course you can get a free comic book for signing up for my newsletter. And I've got a great one coming this year in the fantasy realm, but that's later. I can ramble about that later. If you read my Deus Vult one back in the day, we're doing a sequel, and that's all I'll say for now. But in this observation, he posted the images. In the comic book industry, though, it's been a tactic used for a long time, most notably recently with Absolute Batman from DC Comics. Yes, this is what they've done with the Batman design. If you've not been following the comics, it's absurd. Now, they claim this is the best-selling book of 2024, but they used gimmicks of alternate book cover sales to make this happen. What they do is they have A, B, C, and D covers that they send out and more. There's so many that they do at this point. It's ridiculous. Make it very hard for collectors. And what happens is for a comic shop to get a copy of cover D, and I'm not using the exact ones on this, I'm just using them as examples. They'll have to order 100 copies of cover A to get the right to buy 1 copy of cover D. And so the cover D, costs, $100 or whatever it is, and then it, because it's quote rare on that front, and collectors and speculators buy the book. Now this one was even amplified even further because with this Batman one, retailer stores were actually encouraged to buy their own exclusive cover. Now they had to buy several thousand copies of cover A to qualify to do with that. So when they came out with the sales numbers of this of being like 300,000 or 400,000 or whatever it was, all of those were just like it's things that are sitting in the stock in backgrounds of these cover A's that retailers have thousands of copies of that they can't get rid of because they wanted to get those exclusive variant covers to try to sell on eBay for a profit. Nobody reads any of these books. So how many people are actually reading Absolute Batman right now? I don't know, but it's nowhere near that amount. Now, one comic book retailer has talked to me and told me that he believes that maybe a third of the books that get sold from his shop actually get read. And I kind of get the sneaking suspicion there's a lot of D&D collectors that do very similar with different modules and the like for the games, that there's a lot of collecting going on, not as much playing going on. That people have just collected these for years. I've seen people with full Dungeons & Dragons collections of all of the editions, and I've seen big bookshelves in my friends' houses. And it seems to be that's what they're doing. Now, I've done this with RPGs. I'm guilty of it, too, in the past. I've actually gotten rid of most of mine at this point that I don't play because, when I don't play, that's, why do I have all these books? I'm sad about a couple of them, too, because I had some very, very rare ones, but it's another story. But obviously, they're trying to drum up sales by trying to get a lot of the collectors to buy 2 copies of the book instead of 1 copy of the book. And that's something that the book industry really doesn't do that much. You don't see this kind of thing a lot in normal books. You see it in comics, like I said. That's a tried and true kind of thing. And here's the deal. Every time the comic industry tries this and they launch a new edition and they try to get new readers in on this, the stats have shown that when they do this kind of gimmick, that they actually peel off a lot of the readers because the collectors who have been there for a while go, oh, this is too much, and you lose a fair number of them. So you get a temporary boost in sales from all the fake numbers that are in there, but it actually goes down over time because nobody actually likes this gimmick. And a lot of normal readers who don't want to deal with this stuff, who kind of like to collect, go, you know what, I'm out because this is getting too expensive for me. Now, Hasbro's done this with Magic the Gathering, too, with all their variant art and things like that. They love doing this kind of thing with Magic the Gathering, and I think that's sunk the game as a process. That got me out of Magic the Gathering when I couldn't collect it anymore because there were just too many specialty products that would, require you to be a Bitcoin gorillionaire in order to buy any of it. It's absolutely wild. All right, what do you think about this? Do you think it's a desperate ploy? Love to hear from you. Hope that comic industry background was useful for you guys. Really appreciate you for being there. Hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll be back soon, my friends. Do check out my great fantasy for Steam and Country. It starts out a 6-book series, airship adventuring, some questing, some fun stuff. You're going to love this. Ebook, print, and audio, all available in the description below. Thank you so much for clicking and reading.